Hey there, everyone. I hope you're doing well. In this video, I want to take you on a little bit of a tour of August, some planetary highlights, some big energies of the month, and guide you through what I expect may happen and what we can do to really navigate that energy and not let the energy navigate us, so to speak. So, what I thought I'd do in this video is just take you on a brief tour of what the planets are doing in August, just to give you a sense of the general weather patterns. So I'll start with the big picture and then move closer to us. So Pluto's a big player. It's at the final, well, I shouldn't say the final because it's the first degree, it's 0 degrees of Aquarius, but it's the last month we're going to have Pluto in Aquarius before it goes back into Capricorn early September, spending around 2 weeks there. So it's almost we're on the threshold of something in this sense of, oh, this old chestnut. Some of us are going to be feeling that quite personally. And I think the collective themes are fairly obvious. You might recall that the grand conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter in December of 2020 happened at 0 degrees of Aquarius. We've had Pluto move back and forward over that 0 degree of Aquarius since March of 2023. I think that's when it was. Time is super crazy right now. So there is this sense that I feel that we need to brace ourselves to a certain point, because the next 10 weeks of Pluto in Capricorn, we're really going to see what the powers that be want to give us. And I've done a video a little bit about that, touching on some of my, a few key points there that you might find helpful. I think that was maybe my last video. Neptune in Pisces will also be retrograde as Pluto is, and it will spend the month at 29 degrees. So it's not really moving. Speaking of Neptune, I finally have my link for the Neptune in Aries talk that I'm giving at the end of August. I'll pop a link in the description below where you can find out more about that. Uranus is moving direct and it gets to 27 degrees in August. So that's as far as it's got, as far as the tour of Uranus in Taurus. So Uranus isn't really that big of a player. Thankfully, it's been a little bit chaotic for those Taurus people who don't like too much change. Saturn, however, is retrograde and it's moving a little faster than it has done in recent weeks. Starts the month at 18 degrees and sort of barrels back to 16. So it's moving quickly, but in reverse. And that's a key player for this month. Jupiter spends the month in Gemini, as does Mars. Venus moves quickly. She's starting the month in Leo, moves through Virgo for the majority of the month, and then winds out August in Libra. Mercury is a key player of this month as well, because on the weekend around August 4-5, that planet will station retrograde at 4 Virgo. So it's just a little bit in Virgo and then spends the majority of the retrograde, or actually about half, in Leo. And so it will move back into Leo on the 14th, 15th, and then it will station direct on the 27th. So what's interesting about Mercury is that as it goes in and out of Leo, it makes 3 squares to Uranus. We had the first one July 19. So it was a couple of weeks ago now, and you might recall that was the computer outage that we had. It was a Friday night here. I tried to buy wine and I couldn't, so I had to go somewhere else. Yeah, priorities when you're in a Venus year, right? So we had CrowdStrike, that's what it was called. So we had that big computer outage and it was very, very problematic. So it was really interesting. I mean, it depends on where your conspiracy dial is, but whether that was a mistake or a test, well, whatever. And so Mercury will make another square to Uranus in the month of August. That happens around the 18th, so just building up to the full moon. From my understanding, I think that's, so sorry, the first one in July 19th, so we had the computer stuff, and then logistics on the fritz, communication, technologies on the fritz, very classic archetypes there. So what we might see in August is more of that. So, perhaps brace yourself for some outages, some problems, some hiccups, or how the overlords want to protect us from it all. So, and also that weekend, we've got the second of those squares, and that's under the full moon in Aquarius, which happens at 27 degrees of Aquarius. So that is sort of all building there. There's a lot of energy around that sort of from the 14th, 15th through till around the 20th or 21st of this month. That's the crunchiest time of August. And so that weekend, I believe, is the, what do you call it? Democratic party thing, convention, that's the word. And so when we had Mercury Uranus in July, we had the computer outage, and then a couple of days later, Biden announced that he was out of the race. Whether he announced it, someone else announced it, I don't know. But anyway, it was also another very interesting key feature of Mercury and Uranus, the sort of sudden announcement that someone's mental faculties weren't really up to the job. I mean, that was probably obvious, but the fact that it was sort of broadcast, yeah, kind of obvious, that one. So again, in August, we're going to see more of that energy, and it's just really interesting how it comes up again when that convention is happening. So, if you're in the US, you might be interested in keeping your attention on that one. So one of the key features of August is Mars-Jupiter conjoining in Gemini. So that happens the 14th, 15th, depending on where you're located, at 16 degrees of Gemini. So this is going to be information on steroids. What is truth? What is real? What's, all of the things. It's just going to be this idea of don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. There's just going to be so much spin, so much hype, so much BS around this particular transit. It can be really motivating and inspiring, though, on the personal level. You might feel motivated towards a truthful pursuit. You might feel the idea to take some inspired action around a mercurial or Geminian topic, or wherever Gemini is in your birth chart. What this aspect does remind me of, though, is a few quotes, very Gemini, but I think it was Abraham Lincoln that said, "You can fool all of the people some of the time, some of the people all of the time, but you cannot fool all of the people all of the time." And I think that's going to be really something important to remember throughout August, that everything you read and everything that you hear may not necessarily be the truth. I mean, tell me something we don't know, right? So Mars will conjoin Jupiter. It will come and square Saturn. I'm not a fan of Mars-Saturn squares, despite being born with one. This can be, that inspired action and then a block, and then a big obstacle to overcome, or a sense of running out of gas really fast. And in the collective sphere, I could sort of see how there'll be a lot of spin and hype, and then we're moving on to the next thing, but you're still stuck on the previous thing. I sort of think we had an attempt on a former president's life just a couple of weeks ago, and no one's want to talk about that anymore. I find it preposterous, but it's kind of where we at, because the spin and the hype and just things move so quickly in this information age, in the age of air where we are right now. I remember growing up in the 80s, teenager through the 90s, and who killed JFK was still a topic of interest. Anyway, and I'm in Australia, so there you go. So, so Mars is going to, not that Mars has the capacity to translate light in the sense that the moon can, when the moon can connect to two planets, but what Mars is going to do, it's going to conjoin Jupiter and then move to square Saturn. So Mars is sort of carrying the energy between Mars and Saturn. Oh, sorry, Mars is going to be carrying the energy between Jupiter and Saturn as Jupiter and Saturn are square. So Mars is really triggering the idea of freedom, truth, discovery, adventure, um, versus the planet that's responsible for restriction and government and, the boot type of energy there. So it's going to be a really interesting middle of the month. And even though this is when the aspect builds and perfects, it's going to have a far-reaching influence throughout the rest of 2024 and well into 2025. Because in December, we'll have the second Saturn-Jupiter square, or Jupiter-Saturn square, in Pisces and Gemini. And then in 2025, Jupiter would have moved into Cancer and Saturn moving into Aries. And that's a totally different dynamic. So we're going to have this first square in August, the second one in December, and the Aries Cancer one will happen in 2025. So this Jupiter-Saturn squares historically often they're linked to trouble in finances, trouble with government structures, and how all the cogs in the wheels sort of turn or don't turn. So again, casting your mind back to 2020 when the grand conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn happened and the new normal was introduced. And that was around the time when the first one of those ones happened. I won't use the term here on the tubes, but so yeah, and now Pluto is at that point, and things are trying to come up to the surface. A lot is being revealed, a lot's being talked about, and not just with this, but all the shifting dynamics that happened as a result of decisions that were made, whether they were ill-intended, well-intended. And a lot of money was printed, and I sort of think, what do I have to pay tax for when you can just print money? But anyway, money was thrown left, right, and center, and in this new cycle. So it's taken about 4 years for this to sort of catch up with us. And so Saturn and Jupiter are now squaring each other. So that sort of growth of Jupiter is being grounded by the energy of Saturn. There's also another dynamic, and I won't touch on it too much, but some of you may know what I'm referring to. Jupiter is in Gemini and Saturn is in Pisces. And so Saturn is looking to Jupiter, the ruler of Pisces, for its guidance, for its intel. And so information is really going to be how the Saturn structures, the Saturn authority figures sort of confuse or obscure their movements and what they're doing. On the personal level, you want to look at your Gemini and Pisces house and do what you can to sort of balance the area of growth versus groundedness, and always go for the longer term option where possible, where Saturn's involved. So keeping your eye on the short game and the long game, I think, may be helpful. So there's so much to say about the Jupiter-Saturn squares, but hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea that there's going to be a tension point or a consequence or a limit to growth in August. You might find that there's one area of life you want to say yes to and do all the things, Jupiter and Gemini, and then there's another area of your life where you're just thinking, maybe I should commit myself to those longer term Saturn goals. Maybe I need to be responsible. Maybe I need to rely on facts rather than my feelings, which I think would be probably a good piece of advice all round. So then we have the full moon in Aquarius, so which is really going to sort of light up or illuminate that Jupiter-Saturn square, because it happens, within a day of that aspect perfecting. And the full moon is ruled by Saturn, which is this square. So it is just going to be a little bit of a shite show from around the 14th through to the 21st. So there's some crispy energy there. And then shortly thereafter, we do have the sun moving into Virgo. So this is going to be just a wonderful time to ground yourself, to get back to practicality, back to basics. Yes, take in the data, take in the information, take in the facts, but then just take that moment to breathe and get back into your body. Virgo's a really interesting sign in that way because it's air and it's earth, but it's also ruled by Mercury. So it has the air, cerebral, mercurial dynamic to it, but it's earth, which is in the material, the body, and the groundedness. So finding that connection between the body and the brain or the mind is going to be really, really important. And that's really going to inform um, choices of discernment, decisions of discernment. The Mercury retrograde starts in Virgo, so that's already a clue. So Mercury in Virgo, not only is it in its domicile, it's also in its exaltation. And the first 6 degrees of Virgo are in Mercury's Egyptian terms or bounds. So we have a super, super potent station of Mercury with all those little extra levels of dignity, plus the new moon in Leo. So this is obviously back at the top of the month. And so it is really, to me, it's a little bit hand on heart, Leo stuff, and really thinking, really discerning, really grounding yourself and just asking yourself in this mess, in this flurry of information, in my reactions or responses to this flurry of information, is it right for me? Is it authentic? Am I really, what do they call it? Like dysregulated. I mean, that's everywhere, right? But it is really going to be a time to just really ground yourself and, um, tend to the garden, which is the most authentic and practical to you. Ignore the noise where possible. Life will go on. There's no need to have astrological anxiety about some of these things. If this was more of a geopolitical astro consultation, that could be different. But yeah, that would be my advice is back to basics with Virgo. Get grounded, get practical, and also be solution orientated. It does yourself nor anybody else any good if you're running around like a chook with its head cut off, as we would say here in Australia. I don't know if we say that anywhere else, but we do here. So that's just basically running around like the sky's falling down. All right, that's August. It's a big one, but it's really quiet to begin with, as I mentioned. So do use this balsamic moon phase in Cancer leading up to the Leo new moon to really nurture, reconnect, and figure out your action plan for not only August but also the rest of 2024, because August really does set the scene for the rest of the year with that Jupiter-Saturn square. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I will pop a link to my Neptune and Aries talk if you would like to join me for that. And of course, if you would like to consult in terms of an astrology reading, there are some bookings available for the month of August. So I hope you have a good one. Let me know what you're looking forward to, not looking forward to in the comments. And also feel free to tell me how July played out for you. This is how we all learn astrology further, not just through my monologue, but also the interactions in the comments. So thank you for that, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.